banished by her father for getting pregnant. A young woman is left in the cold hands of a scarred mountain man. But instead of cruelty, she finds unexpected protection. As a brutal winter closes in and hired guns come hunting for her unborn child, survival turns into war. With blood in the snow and fire at their doorstep, she must choose whether to run, fight, or stand her ground. This is the untold Wild West, raw, redemptive, and fiercely human. The wagon creaked like an old man's bones, wheels groaning under the weight of silence and judgment. The road behind them was dusted with frost and the thin tracks of deer. Ahead, the mountains stood like sleeping gods, white-capped and cold, indifferent to the sins of men. She sat hunched in the back, wrists tucked in the folds of her torn shawl, lips bloodied where she'd bitten through sobs. The ride had been long and quiet, save for the occasional cough from the man beside her. Her father, once a feared cattleman with a war medal pinned above his whiskey shelf, now stared straight ahead like he was delivering a calf to slaughter. The cabin appeared as they rounded a bend, hunched low against the hillside, its chimney weeping pale smoke into the gray. She hadn't spoken in hours, hadn't dared to. The words would taste like ash anyway. He pulled the reins, the mule snorted, and everything stopped. The air didn't move. Even the wind seemed to pause in pity. Her father dismounted first, slow from the arthritis he wouldn't name. He walked to the back and grabbed her arm, not cruelly, not gently either, and yanked her down. Her boots hit the dirt hard. She staggered, but didn't fall. Wouldn't give him that. The door opened before they knocked. The man who stepped out looked carved from the land itself, thick-shouldered, wrapped in an elk-hide coat stained with old blood, a long scar curving from his brow into the beard that hadn't seen scissors in years. His eyes were mountain gray and unreadable. "This her?" the mountain man asked, voice low as thunder far off. Her father didn't look at her when he said, "She's yours now." No one moved. "She's bred," her father added, like it was an apology or a selling point. "Ain't been a month since we found out." The mountain man nodded once. A man who measured words like he was afraid of wasting them. Her father turned to her. "Don't come back." And just like that, he climbed into the wagon and drove off without another word. No blessing. No goodbye. She watched until the wagon was swallowed by the trees. Not once did he look back. The wind started again. It nipped at her ankles and pried at her shawl like a curious dog. She stood, spine rigid, mouth dry, unsure whether to run or scream or fold into the dirt and vanish. He stepped aside. The door creaked wider. Inside, the air was thick with wood smoke and boiled roots. The fire popped once, sharp and sudden. The room was small, table, stove, 2 chairs, a cot with a patchwork quilt. A rifle leaned against the corner, and animal pelts lined the walls like trophies from a life of solitude. She didn't speak, just moved slowly past him, waiting for the blow or the grab that never came. Her knees quivered as she sat near the fire. He shut the door, quiet as dusk. He ladled something from a pot, stew, thick with turnip and game, and set it in front of her. A chunk of bread followed. Then he sat in the far chair, not facing her, just watching the fire. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer it. She didn't eat right away. Didn't trust it. Poison wasn't her fear. She almost hoped for that. No, it was the kindness that scared her more. It was too unfamiliar, too cruel in its own way. When she finally dipped the spoon, her hand shook. The stew was hot and bland and real. The man said nothing, just pulled a whittling knife from his boot and began carving at a block of pine. Night thickened outside. The fire shrank. She finished the bowl, not tasting half of it, and wiped her mouth with the sleeve of her shawl. Her eyes stung, not from smoke. "You'll take the bed," he said without looking up. "I sleep by the door." Her voice came out like gravel. "I don't need your bed." He shrugged. Didn't ask. She stared at him a long moment, trying to see the trap, the price. But there was no glint of hunger in his eyes, no smirk on his lips. Just a tired man with quiet hands and a long scar that said he'd seen worse. She took the cot. Sleep came slow, like frost creeping over windows. She didn't dream. She didn't dare. Morning was gray again, like God had gone blind. The man was already outside when she rose, splitting logs with easy swings, steam rising from his breath. He'd left her a basin of water and a clean rag. There was even a comb laid beside it. That simple act undid her more than her father's abandonment. She almost cried then, but stopped herself. There were only so many tears in a body. She couldn't afford to waste them yet. By midday, she'd swept the floor, cleaned the dishes, and sat staring at the fire again while he stitched a torn trapline by the window. They hadn't said more than 10 words. But something had shifted, quiet as snow falling in the dark. Not trust. Not yet. But a truce, maybe. A beginning, jagged and brittle, but real. That night, as wind howled against the door and the trees groaned in their sleep, she asked without looking at him, "Why'd you take me?" He didn't answer right away, just set down the trap line and looked into the fire. "'Cause I know what it's like," he said, "to be thrown away." Then he stood, picked up his rifle, and took the porch for the night. She didn't sleep well, but she didn't hide the knife under her pillow either. And when morning came again, cold and sharp as a new blade, she stayed. The days slowed, thick like syrup in winter. Time up in the mountains didn't march, it settled. Like snow on pines. Like silence in bones. She didn't know the mountain man's name. He never offered it. She never asked. Out here, names felt unnecessary, like luxuries only people with futures bothered to keep. They lived in rhythm. Not harmony, not yet, but rhythm. He rose early, before the sun broke the frost, and brought in water from a creek. She stirred ash to life in the stove and made coffee, weak, bitter, and hot. They didn't speak much. When they did, it was about the practical. Firewood, snares, the kettle boiling too hard. The child inside her stirred sometimes now, soft as butterfly wings. She didn't know whether it was boy or girl, whether it carried her features or the man's who left her behind. All she knew was that it was coming, and fast. Her belly swelled by the week. The mountain man said nothing about it. Not once. But she caught him watching sometimes, quiet, respectful, curious maybe. Once, she dropped the bucket at the well and doubled over with a pain like hot iron under her ribs. He was at her side before she could cry out, rough hands surprisingly gentle. He helped her sit, brought water, said nothing about the tears she tried to blink away. She hated how her body betrayed her, hated how it made her weak, how it reminded her of the thing that got her sent here in the first place. But more than that, she hated how part of her didn't hate the mountain man. How safe she felt when his shadow fell beside her in the snow. The cabin creaked at night. Wind scraped the shutters. Sometimes she'd lie awake and listen to the fire hiss, the sounds of wolves calling each other across the frozen ridges. Once she woke to a sharp thud outside. She looked out the window and saw him kneeling near a carcass, a rifle still warm in his hand. By morning, a hare was skinned and cooking on the stove. He'd left the pelt folded by her stool, as if to say, "You can use this." She started carving spoons in the evenings, using a pocket knife she found in a drawer. Her hands weren't steady, but the work kept her mind still. One night, she left a crooked little spoon beside his bowl. He didn't comment, but used it without hesitation. Later, she found a carved figurine on her shelf, a bear squat and strong, with a tiny bundle cradled in its paws. That night, something broke open inside her. "My name's Miriam," she said softly over the stew. He looked at her, really looked, as if learning the word meant understanding the whole of her. He didn't speak, but nodded once. Days shortened. Snow thickened. Trees groaned under white weight. The world felt like it was holding its breath. She began venturing outside more, even with a cold biting her skin. He showed her how to walk without breaking the crust of snow, how to read tracks, how to spot the glint of a snare in fading light. When she fell behind, he slowed. When she stumbled, he offered a hand, but never reached unless she reached first. They saw a moose once, huge and silent between the trees. She stood breathless beside him, the rifle lowered, his body still as stone. It felt sacred somehow, like the land was showing them something old and holy. Later that week, he brought out an old revolver, wrapped in cloth, cleaned with reverence. He handed it to her like a question. She hesitated. I've never shot a thing in my life. You might have to. He taught her to aim, how to steady her breath. They practiced on trees. Her hands shook, but she didn't miss. One night, while the wind howled and the baby kicked hard enough to steal her breath, she asked, "Did you have a family once?" He didn't answer right away, just stared into the flames like the fire had swallowed the years whole. "A wife," he finally said. "Lost her to fever. The boy didn't make it through the winter after." She said nothing. What could she say to grief older than her? But that night, when she woke to her own sobbing, he was already standing near the hearth, blanket in hand. He didn't touch her, just handed it over, then sat nearby in silence. "I thought he'd come for me," she said after a while. "The father. I really did." He didn't look at her when he said, "Men like that don't come back." She let the tears fall. Didn't bother hiding them this time. And still, time moved. The snow deepened. The trees turned brittle, all bark and black limbs like the ribs of the earth poking through. Food grew scarcer. They rationed without needing to say so. She learned to snare rabbits, how to gut and salt meat, how to spot hawks before they circled low. Then came the tracks. Deep. Boot prints. 3 sets. Leading from the north and circling the cabin before disappearing back into the woods. She spotted them first. She showed him. His jaw clenched. Eyes narrowed like a man reliving an old battle. "They're watching us," he said. "Who?" He didn't answer. He cleaned his rifle that night. Double-checked the door. Sat awake by the window while she tried to sleep. The next morning, she found a bullet on the doorstep. Shiny. Clean. Left like a calling card. Neither of them said anything. But the air shifted. He brought in more firewood than usual. Filled every jug. Sharpened every blade. She practiced reloading the revolver until her hands stopped trembling. There were no more spoons carved. No bears left on shelves. She sat by the fire that night, hand on her stomach, and asked, "Do you think we'll make it through this?" He didn't answer immediately. Just knelt to stoke the fire. Then looked up. "We've already made it further than they ever expected us to." That night, she didn't cry. But neither did she sleep. The first shot didn't come with a warning. It cracked through the trees like lightning through bone, splintering the side of the woodshed just feet from where she'd been hanging laundry. A dry thunk of lead and wood. Then silence, long and dangerous. She hit the ground hard, belly first, arms curled around it without thinking. Somewhere behind her, the chickens screamed and scattered. The cabin door burst open. He was already out, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the tree line with an expression she hadn't seen before, tight, sharp, carved from stone. A man unburied. He didn't shout, didn't curse, just crouched beside her, checked her quickly, eyes, limbs, blood. Found none, nodded once, then told her to crawl. She did. Inside, everything felt too still. The fire hissed in the hearth, the stew boiled like nothing had changed, but her fingers shook against the floorboards. He slid into position at the window, barrel just over the sill, breathing so even it made her angry. "You knew they'd come," she whispered, breath fogging. "I hoped they wouldn't." "Who are they?" He didn't look at her. "Men who think what's in your belly is theirs." The second shot didn't hit anything. Just a warning or a game. She hated not knowing which. "They'll wait for dark," he said. "Try to smoke us out or make us run scared." She glanced at the cradle in the corner, the one he'd carved out of pine and raw patience. Blankets folded, half-finished bear etched into the headboard. "We're not running," she said. He turned to her then, not surprised, not proud, just accepting. "I need you to stay in the back room. Low, quiet. I can shoot. I know. That's not why." She understood anyway. Her shape slowed her now. Her breath came faster after small work. She was no good in a fight, not this kind. Not yet. She moved to the back, slow and crouched, and listened. Hours passed like centuries. Shadows shifted across the walls like creeping doubts. Every sound outside became a threat. A crunch in the snow. A whisper of fabric. A breath caught midair. Once, she thought she saw a man pass by the window, just the flicker of a hat brim, the glint of a belt buckle. She didn't call out. She knew he'd already seen. She wanted to scream, to ask why they were after her. What kind of man sent hired guns after a girl exiled like trash? But she already knew. Power didn't like being told no. Her father hadn't come himself, but he'd sent the kind of men who didn't hesitate when given permission to break things. Men who knew how to take back what didn't belong to them. Dusk came red. The sky bled across the mountains. She could hear them out there now, 3 voices, low and laughing, as if they weren't waiting to kill someone. "You boys sure he's still in there?" one of them called out. Another answered, "If he ran, we'd have seen the tracks." And the girl, "Pause. She's big with it. She ain't gone far." Laughter. Ugly and hollow. He didn't respond. Didn't give them anything. The third voice, deeper, colder, called, "We'll give you a choice, mountain man. Send her out, and we walk away. That's a mercy, far as it goes." She could feel him stiffen through the floorboards. His voice, when it came, was thunder that had learned how to whisper. "You want her," he said. "Come take her." They didn't laugh this time. The first shot back came after full dark. He hit one of them, maybe the loud one, judging by the scream that followed. Then chaos, yells, shuffling feet, curses scattered like leaves in a storm. She clutched the revolver in the back room, hands white-knuckled. She could hear boots crunching closer, scraping along the side of the cabin. Someone trying the back window. She moved before she could be afraid. Pressed against the wall, she waited, pulse in her throat like a war drum. When the window creaked open, and a hand reached through to lift the frame, she didn't hesitate. She fired once. The man didn't fall inside, just screamed and vanished backward into the snow. Her breath came ragged, raw. Outside, another gun barked. Then silence. She waited. After what felt like years, she heard the door open. Heavy boots. A limp in the step. Then his voice. "It's over." She emerged slow, revolver still warm, arms aching from the strain. His coat was dark at the shoulder, blood blooming like a crimson flower. He was pale, but standing. "They're gone," she asked. He nodded once. 2 dead. 1 ran. She didn't ask if he'd chase him. Didn't matter. She helped him to the chair, cleaned the wound, packed it tight with linen torn from a shirt she once wore as a girl. He winced but didn't speak. The cabin was quiet now, except for the fire and the sound of her heartbeat. She found herself shaking again, not from fear this time, but from something bigger. The line they'd crossed. The thing they'd become to each other. "I shot him," she said after a while. Didn't think. Just pulled the trigger. He met her eyes. Good. No judgment. No soft correction. Just truth. "You think my father will send more?" she asked. His jaw clenched. "He might. And next time, we'll be ready." She nodded. Then, without thinking, she knelt beside him, resting her head gently against the arm of the chair. His hand, calloused and clumsy, moved her hair, stayed there. Not in ownership. Not in pity. In something quieter. Stronger. Neither of them said it, but they both knew. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a war they were willing to fight. For each other. For the child. For the second chance they hadn't asked for, but would not let go. And outside, the snow kept falling. The snow burned blue under the moonlight, and the world held its breath. He stood at the window, wounded arm wrapped in clean cloth, his breath fogging the pain. She lay in the cot behind him, propped up against pillows, her hand resting on her stomach, where the child kicked like it knew the storm hadn't passed. 3 nights had come and gone since the firefight. The cabin had been patched where bullets found wood, but the land had gone too quiet. No birds. No wind. Even the trees seemed to listen. Waiting. He'd said nothing, but she knew. One had escaped. And where one ran, others followed. A father with power didn't let insult lie unchallenged. Especially not a man like hers. She remembered her father's face the last time she saw it. Pinched, proud, burning with the kind of anger that thought itself righteous. He hadn't just disowned her. He'd offered her up to the wilderness like a lamb to wolves, expecting the wild to chew her up and spit out the shame. But the wild had teeth of its own, and a heartbeat. He turned from the window. She saw it in his eyes. "They're here." She rose slowly, cradling her stomach as she crossed to the rifle propped by the hearth. He moved to stop her. "You don't have to." "I do." They stepped outside together. The snow swallowed their boots with each step. Moonlight caught on steel. 5 men this time, spaced like a firing line. At the center sat her father, horseback, draped in a long coat, beard like frost-bitten thorns. His eyes met hers and narrowed. "You're coming home," he said flatly. She held the rifle higher. "No. You're my daughter." "You gave that up." He shifted in the saddle, a flick of his gloved hand, and the men stepped forward. She heard the rifle behind her click, him chambering around. She didn't have to look to know he was ready to die for her. Her father's gaze flicked toward the mountain man. "You sheltering my mistake?" The mountain man didn't answer, just stared. "I'll burn that shack." "Shoot the bastard. Take the brat when it's born." "You're not taking anything," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Her knees did. But her voice held. Her father dismounted. Snow cracked under his boots. "You've been poisoned by filth. You think this life is freedom? You think a mongrel born out here will change anything? You come now, and maybe I let you live." "I already started living the day you left me here," she said. "And I don't need your name to raise what's mine." One of the men raised his rifle. Too fast. The mountain man shot first. The man dropped into the snow like a sack of stone. The others fired. Too late. One missed. One didn't. Pain tore through the mountain man's side, staggering him, but he stayed on his feet. Fired again. Chaos swallowed everything. Snow kicked up like smoke. The air stank of gunpowder. One of the horses bolted. The man beside it collapsed. She fell to her knees, fired from behind a stump, saw her father advancing, pistol drawn, murder in his eyes. He was yelling something she didn't hear. It didn't matter. She raised the rifle, finger trembling on the trigger. His face filled her sight, twisted, red, snarling like the wolves she used to fear in her sleep. But this time, she didn't flinch. She fired. The shot hit the snow at his feet. Deliberate. "I won't kill you," she said. "But come any closer, and I won't miss twice." He stopped. The gun wavered in his hand. "You don't belong to him," her father said, voice cracking. She stood tall, snow soaking through her dress. "I never did. And neither does this child." The mountain man limped to her side, bleeding, shoulder dark with blood. "You go now," she said. "And you stay gone. Or next time, I shoot to bury." Her father stared at her, longer than she expected. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Not remorse, not respect, just defeat. A final reckoning with a child he could no longer bend or break. He turned without a word, mounted, and rode into the trees. The others, what remained of them, followed. The snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, like the sky was closing its eyes. She helped him back into the cabin. His breath came ragged. She stitched the wound while he gritted his teeth and stared at the ceiling. "You're going to be all right," she whispered. He chuckled, dry and low. "You always this sure?" "No," she said. "But I'll fight for it anyway." Spring came slower than hope, but it came. They rebuilt the cabin one board at a time. Chopped fresh wood. Set new traps. Buried the past under snow melt and seedlings. When the child came, she labored all night, face pale and jaw clenched. He stayed with her, wiping her brow, whispering stories in that quiet voice of his. Stories of snowstorms survived, of rivers that never froze, of the bear that followed him once for 2 miles without ever meaning harm. When the child arrived, crying and whole, the sun was just beginning to rise. She held the baby against her chest, eyes full and quiet. "You ever think we'd make it?" she asked. He looked at them both. "No," he said. "But I wanted to." That night, the child slept in the cradle carved by hands once meant for killing. Firelight flickered across the walls, and outside, the mountain watched over them, silent and steady. She leaned against him on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, listening to the wind whisper through pine. No name for it. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Just a beginning. And that was enough.